Chapter 9. Moving. Prince and the alderman arrived at the S-house half a minute, perhaps, in advance of Cleo and her now trembling and exceedingly agitated friend. Agitated she had been, all along, but her agitation arose now from a different cause, the dread of the ordeal she was to pass through. That the man she loved with her whole soul, who had most foully wronged her, and added insult to the wrong, should be forced to marry her, was most repugnant to her feelings. "Oh, if he would only marry me of his own free will!" was her mental exclamation, many times repeated since her friend had intimated a power to compel him to wed her. Yet notwithstanding the repugnance she felt at the coercion, in the case of her betrayer, she was fearful lest Cleo had overrated her power, whatever that was, and dreaded the trial, lest it should fail, feared that Harry Horton, to be married to whom of his own free will she would have given worlds, would defy her friend and refuse, in her own case, the only reparation in his power, and not only these, but that he might further outrage her feelings, and he had that night by taunting, scoffing, scorning her. Worlds she would have given, would he marry her of his own volition, worlds she would have lost, rather than that Cleo should fail in her attempt at coercion. The latter saw Prince, before her carriage drove up to the walk in front of the hotel, and got out immediately it stopped, whereupon she was introduced to the alderman by her friend and waiting. "You know the program, I suppose, alderman, what the performance is to be?" she immediately said, upon being introduced as Mr. Mendez. "Yes, this gentleman gave me to understand what the play was to be, and that I was to be one of the actors," returned the official, laughing, adding, "It's rather a sudden call, with no rehearsal of late, but I guess I can go through my part correctly." "Undoubtedly, alderman," said Cleo. "It will be a play of one act, but how many scenes can't be told just now." While she spoke, a fine-looking gentleman, with a florid countenance and long blonde mustache, passed, to whom Prince said, "Good evening, Doucet." "That's the detective you pointed out to me last evening, isn't it, Hal?" inquired Cleo, who caught sight of the good-looking face as it passed. "Yes, that's him," replied Prince. "Just the man I want. Engage his services for a short time, Hal, my envoy extraordinary and minister plenipotentiary. It is possible, barely possible, they may be needed, but for her sake I hope not." All in the dark respecting the merits of the case in hand, which Cleo was "working up" in her own way, but knowing that a marriage was to be forced, or an arrest to take place, Prince started off after the detective, soon returning with and introducing him to Mendez, who immediately said, "I may or may not require your services, sir, according as matters eventuate. Will you accompany us into the hotel, sir?" "Certainly, sir. I have no option in the matter," replied the officer, politely. Stepping into the carriage, aside from which she had stood with the others of the wedding party, Cleo, to the occupant, said, "Come, Sue, be brave, my dear little girl." As the latter stepped to the walk, her friend whispered in her ear, "Don't betray me, Sue. Be careful." A shake of the head and a nod were the replies from the agitated young girl, all that were required. Turning to Prince, Cleo said, in an undertone, "Get 2 private rooms, Hal, and order in some wine and cigars. There's a supper now being enjoyed by a party in one of the rooms of the hotel, and as I propose to augment that party, by inviting to it myself and friends before many minutes, I should not object to rooms close by, as a base of operations, in military parlance. I'll introduce you to my friends at the right time." She turned to her friend Sue again, and Prince entered the hotel, she and the others following immediately. In the ladies' parlor, she awaited with her protégé the coming of Prince, who shortly made his appearance at the door with the servant, who carried 2 bottles of wine, half a dozen glasses, and a tumbler of cigars on a server. "He will show you the rooms, and I'll be up in a moment with the other gentlemen," said Prince, and then retired. The rooms, on the same floor with the ladies' parlor, connected, one being next to that in which the convivial party spoken of was holding high revel, as the sounds of song and laughter, high talk and ringing of glasses gave ample evidence. This room Cleo took for herself and friend, sending the wine into the other apartment, into which came Prince and the other 2 gentlemen very shortly, Cleo joining them as they entered. "Now, gentlemen, sit down and make yourselves at home, while I open up one of these bottles. she said in her usual gay way, going to the table in the center of the room, on which stood the wine, and taking up one of the bottles with a knife, which lay beside it. Proceeding to cut the strings, she said, "This isn't my hotel, but while I'm in it, gents, I shall make myself at home, and I hope you will." "Pop!" she exclaimed, as the cork flew from the bottle, ceilingward. "That's one of the concomitant beauties of champagne, gentlemen. The pop! There is pleasure in the sound, as there is joy in the wine after," she said, as she filled the glasses. "Now take hold of it, gents, while it is laughing. I am rather fond of it myself, and I hope you are not averse to it." "I'm afraid I shall have to set my face against it," said the alderman, facetiously, rising from his seat and proceeding to the table as he spoke, evidently not opposed to the vinous beverage. "I've run it down before now, but don't care if I try a little on this particular occasion," said the officer, whom Prince called Doucet, rising and following in the wake of the alderman. "You are very happy, gentlemen," said Cleo. "As you have run it down, Mr. Officer, you should now make amends, and drink it up. Can't you say something pretty, Hal?" she queried, as the latter came to the table. "Nothing prettier that I can think of, Juan, than to say it is seldom I take anything, but when I do, it is just about this time." "Very good for you, Hal. Well, gents, here's to you," said the entertainer, raising her glass, the others following suit, "and hoping," she added, "that your part, Mr. Officer, will be left out in the coming play, and that the alderman will be the actor called for." The wine drank, Cleo filled another glass, and, asking to be excused, went with it into the adjoining room. "Now, Sue, my dear girl, I want you to drink this. It is wine, and will do you good. You need it under the circumstances, and you know I would urge you to do nothing that I did not consider to be your good. Take it and drink it, my dear child. It will do you no harm, but much good." "If you insist, Miss Cleo, I will," said the young girl, looking up at her patroness, but without extending her hand for the glass. "I do insist, Sue, dear, on the ground that it will do you ever so much good physically. I wouldn't say so if I did not believe it. I don't expect you to enjoy it, but I recommend it medicinally. Drink it right down now, it will give you courage and strength, and you need both." The young girl took the proffered glass, placed it to her lips in a mechanical manner, hesitated for a moment as she gazed into the sparkling liquid. She had never tasted wine or liquor of any kind, and then, throwing her head back, gulped the wine as one would a nauseous dose. The instant she swallowed the lively liquid, the glass dropped from her hand, and, gasping for breath, and gulping the gaseous fluid, she sprang to her feet, half strangled by the effervescing potation, and clutched at Cleo as if for very life. She essayed to speak, but the utterance was strangled in her throat, and, if possible, she looked paler than ever from fright. As she would have done with an infant in a semi-strangled state, so did Cleo with the strangling girl, patted her on the back, only the patting was more pronounced. "I was thoughtless, my poor child," she said as her protégée recovered somewhat from the effects of the effervescent fluid. "I ought to have thought that you were a stranger to the gaseous fluid, and what the effects would have been from a too sudden swallowing. But you are all right now, my dear girl, and will be none the worse, but better for the drinking." "But I don't want any more," said the young girl, not fully able to speak connectedly, the gas from the fermented fluid still rising in her throat and escaping from her mouth and nostrils. "And you needn't have any more, dear Sue," returned to Cleo, who couldn't help laughing at the remark of her protégée and its broken utterance. "If you do drink any more, drink it slow, Sue," laughing still more as she added, "and this advice is on the principle of door locking after horse stealing has been successfully practiced. But now sit down, Sue, and I'll be with you in a moment." Gently forcing her to a seat, Cleo left the room for the other, returning in about 3 minutes, and seating herself close by her little friend, who really seemed to be somewhat revived, and, no doubt, the wine she had swallowed had proven beneficial in its effects upon her system. "And now, Sue, let me ask you," said Cleo, a moment, taking the young girl's hand. Will you, dare you go in there and demand what is your right? Demand him to fulfill the vow he violated. Boldly demand, not beg, for I believe, Sue, that the might is behind you, that will make right what is now wrong. You have the right, anyway, before high heaven to demand of that man. But without the might behind you, he wouldn't respect it, would scorn you. Dare you, can you do it, Sue?" "Oh, no, no, no!" exclaimed the young girl, emphatically, pressing her left hand to her brow. "Oh, I couldn't do it for the world, Miss Cleo. Not for the whole world. I couldn't speak. I should drop dead. Oh, don't ask me, Miss Cleo. I can't do it. Can't." "The more's the pity, poor child, for the satisfaction would be all the greater with the coming of the sequel, if you could, to me at all events. But it is asking too much of you, poor child, I suppose." At this moment, the sound of revelry proceeding from the supper party in the next room swelled high above the previous notes and key, for the wine was flowing freely, and congenial spirits were indulging deeply. Pleasure was at the fore, all else behind, for the time being. "Ha! That's your voice, Harry Horton!" exclaimed Cleo, as the sound of song came to her ears at the moment, the leading voice, a pure high tenor, his whom she named. "Sing and be gay while yet you may, you festive ones," she continued, "for time is flying and joy is fleeting, and with one of you, quickly." She had risen to her feet at her first utterance, looking towards the partition between herself and the revellers, and after her last she turned to her protégé, saying, "But you will go in with me, Sue?" This was interrogatory, but, at the same time, commandatory. "Yes, with you, Miss Cleo." Anything possible for her to do, she would have done at the request of her friend, and she felt it to be possible for her to go where he was, with her, without her impossible. Cleo stood for a moment, after the response of the other, in deep thought. Suddenly, she went to the bell cord and pulled it smartly, then back and forth the room she paced, lightly whipping her right leg with her riding whip, which, excepting when she was opening the bottle of wine in the other room, had not left her hand. She was cogitating, pondering, perhaps, the way to proceed in the matter at hand, or, perhaps, considering the probabilities and possibilities in the case. A knock at the door. She answered it. "A sheet of note, paper and envelope, waiter, and more wine for the other room. Same as before, 2 bottles. Here." At this she passed a 50-cent stamp, closed the door, and commenced to pace the room again. In due time the waiter was at the door with the articles required. Taking the paper and envelope, Cleo told him to return after delivering the wine, and wait at the door. Laying her whip on the table, she sat down and commenced immediately to write, her little friend watching her intently, as she had all along. The note was short, sharp, and decisive. It read thus: "Sir, you have wronged a certain woman, nothing, however, for you. You have violated your solemn oath, nothing again for you. In this instance, however, the wrong must be righted, the vow fulfilled. She is here with a friend, to demand the only reparation you can make. The woman in this case is Sue Martin, the friend at her back is, yours in haste, J.M. Harry Horton, Esquire. N.B. This means business." Sealing this up, she quickly superscribed the envelope and went to the door, taking a stamp from her vest pocket. "That's for the person in the next room, the one on the left, where all this music is going on," she said to the waiter, passing him the note and stamp. "Wait for an answer, John. Go." She paced the room till the waiter's return. In about 5 minutes the answer came back in the same envelope, written on the same sheet. This was also short and sharp, if not decisive. It read thus: "Sir or Madam, Sue Martin and her friend. I hope she will find all the friends she wants. May go right straight to blazes. If J.M. is in haste, as here she says, here she had better get up and get on the double quick, though the fire won't go out for some time, according to Hoyle. Yours in no sort of a hurry, Harry Horton. J.M. P.S. Pleasure before business." How Cleo's eyes flashed at the reading of this reply! They fairly glared with the most intense light, and large as they were ordinarily, seemed to increase in size. She sprang to her feet, having seated herself after the waiter had brought the reply, and almost fiercely seized her whip. The lioness within her was rousing itself from an hour's slumber. Infamous, blasphemous wretch! She exclaimed, striking the marble-top table with her plaint weapon, with passionate force. The infamous insult to her friend, conveyed in that parenthetical sentence, to say nothing of the rest of the profane reply, was what roused the lioness, and God help Harry Horton now, if she held the latter by any power equal to compulsion. To and fro, like the animal we have named will pace, when caged, placed Cleo a moment or two, when, throwing her whip on the table, she took a cigarette from a package in the watch-pocket of her vest, and, continuing her promenade, quickly had it ready for her lips, drawing forth, then, a gold match-case, from which she took a wax match or taper, and lighting this, lighted the cigarette. 3 long puffs and strong puffs she took, every particle of smoke being forced through her nostrils, and then, throwing upon the table the unburned portion, very small, of the papered weed, she called out, "Harry!" And all this time, her little pale-faced, beautiful protégé had watched her every movement, her every expression, with what feelings it would have been hard for her, and impossible for us to tell. Prince came in directly, and Cleo partially closed the door, which opened into the room she was in, her passion having subsided. "Harry," she said in an undertone, "the drama is about to open. If you wish to witness it, come to the playhouse, next door. It is not necessary the others should come, until one or the other is wanted, in which case both can come, of course. Tell them to excuse us for a short time, and if more wine and cigars are wanted, order, Hal." Prince stepped into the adjoining room immediately, and Cleo, approaching her protégé, said, "You remain here, Sue, for a few moments, until I come for you. It won't be long, my beautiful Sue." Prince now entered the room, remaining near the door, taking no notice of Cleo's protégé. He had not, previously, from considerations of delicacy, obvious to the reader, of course. Cleo went up to him, when he said, in a low tone, earnestly, but with a slight smile, "I hope this won't be a comedy of errors, Cleo." "Or Much Ado About Nothing, eh, Hal?" she rejoined, smiling confidently. "Or Love's Labor Lost," said he. "I think not, Hal. There will be measure for measure. His measure of wickedness is full, and my measure of retribution shall be full, as far as I am interested. And there may be a tempest, but all's well that ends well, you know, Hal." This last was so uttered as to convince Prince that the comedy of errors was not on the bills, and from her confidence he became confident, and more so when she said, "It won't be on the taming of the shrew, but the taming of a much worse than a shrew." Going to the table as she spoke, she picked up a horsewhip, but immediately cast it down again, saying, "No, I shall not want that. I've what is better, if needed. Come, Hal," she said. "You follow where I lead." "As you like it," returned Hal, the two leaving the apartment. Chapter 10. Righted. Not loudly, nor yet gently, did Juan Mendez knock at the door of the room wherein the convivialists were rioting in their revels, per se. The knock was answered shortly by Harry Horton, who opened the door a trifle, his eyes taking in Mendez only, the latter being the only one in the line of his sight. He looked at him an instant, and then said, "Who are you, sir, and what do you come here for?" Looking at him with flashing eyes, supplementing these queries in a moment, with another to the same effect, being, in fact, his second query, curtailed, and with a substituted word, "What do you want?" Mendez, whose face showed no signs of a chafing lioness within his breast, very coolly took forth a card case of gold, elegantly chased, and taking from it a card, threw it with a peculiar motion towards the speaker, it falling within 2 inches of the plate in front of the latter. "That," he said aloftily, "will answer your first inquiry. As to the second, let me say I come here on business. As to the third, what I want is justice, and I'll have it, justice for another." At first, Horton was astonished, but in a moment he was himself again, looking with nonchalant at the fire. "So, you are Juan Mendez, eh? Never heard of you before, sir. But sit down, Don Juan. Pass that chair, waiter. Throw business to the winds, Don, and do justice to some wine. Open a fresh bottle, Charles Henry Augustus." Mendez bit his lips slightly, for these words conveyed insult, and the tone indicated contempt, but the look of cool and firm resolve was not ruffled on his face. "So, you never heard of me before? Well, you know me now by name, and before we part, will know me better by nature, Mr. Harry Horton. No chair, no wine for me, sir," rejoinder to the other. "No doubt I shall be glad to know you, Don," said Horton in a mocking tone. "You are quite a swell indeed, and I wouldn't mind promenading Broadway with you occasionally, and I don't do that with everybody, Don. But come, what's your business? You are interfering with our pleasures." "My note intimated the business I am on," coolly returned Mendez. "Well now, look here, my dandy Don. You don't think that cock will fight, do you? If you do, you must be a darned fool. What do you take me for, eh?" "What I take you for, Mr. Harry Horton, I will say by and by. Say now, that cock will fight, sure," was Mendez's rejoinder. Ending, he took his watch from his pocket with his left hand, his right at his pistol pocket, the right front of his coat thrown back in consequence. Pressing it open, he glanced at the dial, and then closing and returning the timekeeper to his pocket, he said, very deliberately, "Half an hour for preliminaries we have, if that is necessary, Mr. Horton. It all lays with you. The beginning of the end is now on. The end will have come with the Sunday, when you will pursue life under far different auspices, in one way or another." "What on earth do you mean?" Horton now belched furiously out. "Business," was the quiet reply, in the firmest of tones. "Confound it! Out with it, then!" exclaimed Horton, forcibly, and not a little fiercely. "This thing has been going on long enough, by thunder!" "By Jiminy, that's so!" exclaimed his male companion, more flushed than himself, looking savagely at the audacious intruder. The letting of their angry passions rise, and losing them, on the part of the worthy pair, it was evident would tend to hasten matters to a conclusion, and Prince, who so stood at the door as to see and be seen by his friend, but unseen by the others, felt that the crisis was at hand. In reply to the exclamation of Horton's friend, Mendez said, "Mind your business, sir. You have none with me, nor I with you." The speaker's left hand was fumbling in the pocket of his pants as he uttered this. "Well, by Jove, this is a little too much," roared the now irate friend of Horton, Tom Wales by name. "You get out of this, young feller, now, on the double quick, or by Jupiter will bounce you. Go!" As he thus exclaimed, he pulled for a small revolver and laid it near his plate, Mendez smiling at the act. "Yes, let's bounce him, Tom," said Horton, and rose to his feet, the other following suit. "You sit down, sir, if you don't wish to get into trouble," exclaimed Mendez, the muzzle of a revolver in his left hand, pointing at the face of Wales, who instantly seated himself, for he read business in the eye and tone of the speaker. "And you perjured villain," exclaimed Mendez, turning to Wales vis-a-vis Horton. "You sit down too. Neither of you will bounce anybody here tonight, and if there's any bouncing to be done, I'll do it, and if anybody is to be bounced, that body will be you, Harry Horton." The latter, with a fearful oath, exclaimed, "Who are you that calls me a perjured villain?" And with another oath, his face and eyes burning and flashing with rage, he seized a carving knife from one of the dishes before him. But before he could make a demonstration, the muzzle of another revolver looked him in the eye, and he, though he did not see himself, made no sign. He read business, too, in those pistols, if not in the tones and bearing of the intruder, now standing with the two revolvers pointing at the heads of the two principals at the whilom festive board, but now hardly that. "Harry Horton," spoke Mendez, after a moment, "what I take you for, I have said, a perjured villain." Horton, with an oath, raised the knife, and seemed on the point of springing for the speaker, to bury it in his heart.